Buonasera, benvenuti a tutti in questa splendida location altro quando e benvenuti dalle edizioni Spazio Interiore, la casa editrice di Roma che ha avuto il piacere e l'onore di pubblicare questo libro, Frammenti di un insegnamento psichedelico, del nostro Julian Palmer, ricercatore australiano che abbiamo avuto la fortuna di incrociare in Italia e di far venire qui a parlarci in prima persona sia del libro sia e soprattutto di quella che è la sua esperienza, i suoi studi nel campo della psichedelia. La psichedelia, che soprattutto in Italia è un argomento che a me piace definire come l'argomento di cui tutti parlano ma di cui ben pochi sanno veramente qualcosa. Siamo tutti pronti a farci un'idea e a cristallizzare quell'idea. E uno dei tanti pregi del libro di Julian è stato quello di aver, almeno secondo me, sovvertito qualunque convinzione. Ricordo ancora che, forse come esponente di cultura media, di ciò che si conosce della psichedelia, io pensavo che gli psichedelici non fossero altro che una via di fuga dalla realtà o comunque una cosa brutta, pericolosa, una cosa che allontanasse dalla profondità dell'esistenza. Attraverso la lettura di alcuni libri ho scoperto che questa è solo una dei tanti modi in cui la psichedelia può essere vista e piano piano ho scoperto un mondo sommerso in qualche modo, un utilizzo di tutto ciò che noi mandiamo sotto il nome di psichedelia che può essere profondamente diverso. E lì mi sono resa conto degli approcci differenti che vari testi, vari sostenitori o detrattori acquisiscono, o pro o contro, o sono una cosa meravigliosa, fantastica da utilizzare assolutamente, o sono la dannazione, sono il male del secolo. Una delle cose che maggiormente ho apprezzato del libro di Julian è stato proprio quello di restituire alla psichedelia innanzitutto una forma di neutralità. È uno strumento e come strumento può essere utilizzato in svariati modi. Tutto sta a esserne consapevoli. Esiste un modo pericoloso, rischioso e lui ne parla. Esiste un modo costruttivo e lui ne parla. Ma più di ogni altra cosa, quello che lui sottolinea e che secondo me è il messaggio che poi accomuna tutti noi che siamo qui, tutti i libri che pubblichiamo, tutti i lavori che facciamo, è il richiamo all'autoresponsabilità delle persone. Se non ricordo male, e prego Julian di correggermi se sto sbagliando, più di una volta lui sottolinea il concetto che qualunque sostegno psichedelico, pianta sacra, qualunque cosa, è uno strumento che aiuta, ma le gambe su cui devi camminare e fare il lavoro sono le tue. Non esiste che qualunque esperienza di questo tipo venga vissuta come una sorta di bacchetta magica che ti deresponsabilizza, ti tira fuori dalla responsabilità di sfruttare l'insegnamento e tradurlo in realtà. Io credo che se questi concetti riuscissero a passare e alla psichedelia fosse restituita la possibilità di essere vissuta in maniera consapevole e responsabile, tutta l'umanità farebbe un grosso passo avanti e soprattutto magari diminuirebbe quell'uso, chiamiamolo inconsapevole per usare un eufemismo, che non fa bene a nessuno. Alle 7 in punto noi dovremo liberare la sala, quindi voglio lasciare la parola a Julian e poter ascoltare finalmente in prima persona l'esperienza diretta di chi, senza paura, con coraggio e con integrità, ha percorso più e più strade, riconoscendo i suoi errori e condividendo, questa è la cosa più importante, i suoi risultati. Bene, io ringrazio ancora tanto Julian per essere venuto fino a Roma da noi e vi lascio la parola e vado a sedermi per ascoltarlo. Grazie mille Julian.
Thank you, Alisa. I'm here to talk about psychedelics. Now, many people use words like entheogens, psychoactive plants is also a good one. But for my book, I decided to use the classic word psychedelics. And as Alisa mentioned, psychedelics, I feel, have often been misunderstood in the global culture, and especially the West, where there has been only until recently psychedelics have been stuck in late 60s hippie ideology. And Articulations, which is what my book is called in English, was released in 2014 and written between 2010 and 2014, basically before this so-called psychedelic renaissance had really occurred. And in that book, I wanted to communicate what I felt were the most constructive contexts, the most constructive mindsets and settings, but also the most constructive understandings of psychedelics, because I do believe that psychedelics are extremely interesting and they can show us much, not just about the human mind and the human soul. They can show us the nature of the cosmos and reality itself if we use them appropriately and with consciousness. So my book was written as a guideline or guidebook to using psychedelics with consciousness, with focus and awareness, so that people could gain a sense of healing and balance. So this is different to a purely recreational approach, which Elisa mentioned earlier, which I think is perhaps a default idea that many people have of psychedelics, that to take a psychedelic is to go out of one's mind, is to escape reality. And this, I don't believe, is necessarily all negative. This approach is not entirely without merit. There is no such thing as just escaping reality, because to escape reality or go out of your mind, you must in fact have an experience of something else. Now, I think this is the important element that I believe is most essential and important, is understanding and differentiating what it is we're experiencing when we go outside of our normal frame of mind. What it is, or what is it that an altered state is, and how valid is that altered state, and what can we do with that altered state for the sake of ourselves and the sake of others and the sake of humanity. How can we use this state to truly benefit and bring some true fruitfulness into our own life? So this is what this talk is about today. It is about the purposes of psychedelics and how we can use them to bring that fruit into our life, but to bring that fruit into our life, in some sense, we've got to understand what that fruit is. Now, if you are running I suppose, consumer, capitalistic, mainstream scientific perspective, you may perceive that there is only the brain, and to take a psychedelic is to create a state of temporary psychosis, which is aberrant and without value and purpose. I believe the fundamental revelation of psychedelics is that through these, especially these psychoactive plants, but also through these chemicals, we can realize that there is a greater reality, that it is not just that we are reaching an altered state, assuming that the state that we start in at present is some sort of baseline state. Perhaps the state that we are living in as a baseline normality is some sort of fallen state, as religion would communicate to us, and that psychedelics can bring us closer to a state which is more true to our original nature and the nature of the universe. But fundamentally, we can come into contact with the elements within the universe, perhaps the nature of other dimensions, of other beings, of plant teachers. And we're talking particularly of these elements that are normally considered to be the world of the unseen. And this world that is not normally perceived in the ordinary state of consciousness can often be perceived by taking psychedelics. And in the 60s, perhaps LSD was not necessarily the most, I'll say that a different way. I would say that LSD is not necessarily the best way or the most conducive way that you can experience other realities. And I go into this in my book and describe that I believe that when we take LSD, we're not experiencing hallucinations or projections of the mind, that we're communicating with a semi-synthetic spirit of the ergot which communicates with us. And this manifestation, I believe, is a visionary manifestation within the brain. In some sense, the LSD possesses the brain and shows us these manifestations. However, in the 60s, people would take large amounts of LSD, 250 micrograms, 500 micrograms, whereas these days you're lucky to get a tab with 50 micrograms. This is the era of the disco biscuit. So, actually, this is the first thing that I wanted to talk about, the recreational use of psychedelics. And I believe whenever there is the inclination to take psychedelics for a purely recreational sense, there is always the possibility of insight. There is always the possibility of not just having fun, not just escapism, not just perhaps entering into an ecstatic mode, but also having insight into oneself, other people, having much more breadth of thinking, and generally much more awareness of life. So I don't believe there is ever just a pure recreational use of psychedelics. I think what is quite interesting is the psychedelic dance party culture, because especially in the 1990s, the aim and the name of the game was for people to reach a trance-like state. By taking psychedelics in the Goa party culture, people would aim to stay up all night and go into a trance, and in that trance state, the LSD, for example, by itself is one thing, but when you go into a trance and you take in LSD, that opens up a whole other realm of perhaps shamanic potential. So I do know people who were partying in those days in the 1990s, the golden age of psychedelic dance parties. And only in very few countries today do you ever find people who dance all night, non-stop, attempting to go into a trance state, simply because often the music is not conducive, and a lot of the inhabitants of the psychedelic dance party milieu today are often people simply seeking hedonism or escape. So for many of the old-timers, what's happening now is quite disheartening. So I think even taking MDMA at a dance party and dancing all night is fantastic and can give people a great sense of hope and joy and enlivenment. And this is important. This is the Dionysian urge. This is the urge to pleasure, to experience ecstasy. And our society often castigates those and does not want people to reach an ecstatic state of pleasure. Our society is a society who worships the god Apollo. Is very much more practical. You're supposed to go to work. You're not supposed to be in ecstasy. You're supposed to be practical, functional. And I think that psychedelics, this is something that is important, that we embrace this aspect of not just entertainment, but enjoyment, pleasure, enlivenment, because in this space we can feel that we're living life and we can experience hope, we can experience that life is worth living. And for many people, I know in my country the suicide rate for people, a lot of people, the highest cause of death for men in Australia is suicide, for example. Now, I think probably if in our society, people could access MDMA in a therapeutic situation where they could actually address their issues, and they could actually have a perspective that actually life is worth living, that I think that MDMA can often give people an understanding that, wait on, there is, in this melting, in this release of the defenses, there is an understanding that actually love is a palpable experience, that there is meaning, that there is purpose in life. On the other hand, there is another word called psychonaut, and when people call me a psychonaut, I say, wow, that's not really my favorite label. I would prefer you didn't call me that, because the psychonaut is the one who is a little bit like a Trekkie, is a little bit like the explorer. And generally the psychonaut is 19 to 26, and I generally find the psychonaut is an unsustainable path. Just like smoking DMT is an unsustainable path. I've been involved in the psychedelic world since 1999 and known a lot of people in that world. I couldn't tell you of anyone I know who smokes DMT every month. More like once a year, every 2 years. It's something very intense. And sure, you can go back to it, but I'm not sure it's a sustainable path. And I'm not sure this sort of vertical projection into the other worlds and the exploration by itself is a sustainable path. Because, again, like I wanted to talk about, we're talking about fruitfulness. We're talking about what is the fruit, what is the value, what do we want to bring back. I guess Terence McKenna would talk about, trying to bring something back. And that's not really hard. sorry, that is really hard to do, because a lot of what you do experience is just, it is the ineffable, it is the mystery, and it remains on its own terms. It's difficult to bring back the 16th dimension or the 25th dimension into the third dimension, and probably you shouldn't try it. You just leave that 18th dimension stuff in the 18th dimension. So what we're seeing now, in the last few years, especially in the so-called psychedelic renaissance, is we're seeing a lot of scientific studies that are being allowed, and it's a very passionate scene, and of course it's a very interesting area of science, and many enthusiastic people, young people especially, moving into this area. So we are going to see a great deal more of that, which is good to see. And much of it are these researchers who are trying to bring psychedelics into the mainstream arena, actually appear credible, because there still are taboos in the mainstream society on many different levels, and they're actually often without logic or reason or rationale. They're simply cultural taboos. And to break those cultural taboos, many people in the scientific arena are working on studies that are quite stripped back, that are looking to address human problems and issues that human beings are facing. Because psychedelics do work to treat these issues, such as cluster headaches, for example, and psychedelics are the only treatment that works for cluster headaches. Anxiety and depression are the two other issues. And the interesting thing is, anxiety and depression pretty much are something, elements that are, it's an epidemic in Australia. People are just not happy, basically. They're not happy with their life, they're not happy with who they are, they're not happy with their job, they're not happy with their relationships, they're just not happy. And the labels that we have for people who are not happy, people are depressed. But people are also anxious, and they are fearful. And a lot of people have panic attacks. I have my own theories about panic attacks and also about cluster headaches. I believe that cluster headaches are attacks from not other dimensional entities, but entities in the etheric world that exists within this dimension. Last November in Iran, I experienced a major attack by entities, and I saw an operation take place in which I did not defend myself from properly. And after that time, when I woke up, an hour after I woke up, I experienced a massive headache that basically had me rolling around on the floor. Google cluster headaches or suicide headaches, and you'll see these people careening around the room, basically banging their head and running around. It's incredible pain. And my experience was, what is going on here? It's a very long story, but I managed to cure myself of this this migraine attack. It would come at clockwork every day, and through the use of acacia and Syrian rue and techniques that I utilized to clear entities, I was able to cure myself of these cluster headaches. But generally, when people are diagnosed with cluster headaches, they're looking at years. They're looking at years of just being completely dysfunctional. And psychedelics, for whatever reason, do work. I don't understand why psychedelics do work, but perhaps it is related somehow to mechanisms that do proceed via some sort of grace or intention from the effect of the psychedelics. So that's simply my theory and my experience. In terms of how psychedelics work in general, how psychedelics can heal people, so, you know, the science is beginning to show that psychedelics form new connections in the brain. And we can experience that. We don't need science to tell us that. Like many of these scientific studies, they're actually showing us things that we already know, that we already experience. When we expand our consciousness and take, for example, when you're taking ayahuasca or you're smoking DMT, I would perceive DMT as a super neurotransmitter. Other people disagree with me. It is very much related to serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter. And I believe what we are experiencing then is the transmission of more information than there was previously. That you are experiencing much more information than you previously were experiencing. And so there is the possibility to experience fresh data, fresh information. And that inspiration can occur in many tangible forms. For example, the first level experience when you say smoke DMT or you take ayahuasca is these geometric patterns. Now, geometry is the visual mathematical language of the universe, and the colors that you see are pure colors. That is pure information, that is inspirational in and of itself. You won't see pure colours very often in our world. There are no pure colours in this room. You only find pure colours in nature, in flowers, in animals. Think of life 1,000 years ago. The only colour you would find is in nature. Even the experience of experiencing the colours and the geometry, this is fresh information. This is mathematical information being coded into your brain, which can help bring you into alignment with the mathematical programming of the universe. So this is very significant. And a lot of people might see these geometric patterns and say, oh, it looked pretty, but I don't know what it meant. It's important that it happened. And the other thing that we can experience when we take psychedelics is we can have fresh insights. We can have a greater awareness of anything that we choose to have awareness of, simply because we're looking at any issue or element, whether it's ourselves, our relationships, the things that we do in the world, politics, and so on and so forth. With that expanded awareness can bring insight and fresh inspirational thinking, which can help us to solve problems and therefore to move forward in whatever it is that we're doing in the world. I think another important aspect of psychedelics, which is perhaps underrated and not really well known about, is that especially when we're talking of psychoactive plants, I believe and experience the psychoactive plants as being agents of healing. That they themselves are spiritual healers which are engaging with us directly. and that I don't necessarily understand how the plants are healing, carrying out this spiritual healing, but it's something that I experience and I've seen in hundreds of people. And what you are experiencing is often a magical, what appears to be a magical reset. For example, many of the top neuroscientists in the world have been attempting to understand iboga, because iboga is a mystery. How does it work? We know it resets the brain. When you take it, you can experience it resetting the firmware in your brain. You can experience it defragging the information in your brain. And when you take it, you can experience this happening directly, and the results are absolutely palpable. So, in terms of taking psychedelics, many people take psychedelics because they want to have a deeper spiritual connection with themselves. And there is quite a movement today. I'm not sure how popular the Bufo alvarius toad is in Italy, but I know in Australia it is very popular now, because people smoke this toad venom from the Bufo alvarius toad, which contains 5-MeO-DMT, and if you smoke it properly, pretty much guaranteed to have an experience of the artist previously known as God. And people love that. You know, people they're always seeking to have these ultra spiritual experience. My personal belief, again, I do not believe smoking DMT in any form is sustainable. I see a lot of people reaching back for the toad again and again and again. In this instance, I do believe once you got the message, hang up the phone, because in that space, it is a space of transcendence, and I believe if people are just continually transcend, there's no, again, what's the fruit? What's the benefit? Of course, I understand the toad experience can be healing, but my belief is that 5-MeO-DMT is best taken in a very small amounts. The best use of 5-MeO-DMT I have found is with smoking synthetic 5-MeO-DMT of a high quality, not the Chinese stuff, which they don't make anymore because it's illegal. But if you can get the really good Canadian or Swiss stuff and smoke maybe even a few milligrams, 5 milligrams of that, that's when you're going to experience a level of human connection, healing, understanding, love, light, consciousness. And I believe in the lower dose of smoking 5-MeO-DMT that has the most value, because what I'm seeing today is a lot of people reaching back for smoking the toad, and it simply becomes a form of spiritual bypassing. It becomes a reaching to, again, it's a little bit like this psychonautic thing where people are going into this, what they believe is some sort of ultimate reality. It isn't necessarily either. It just appears that way. It hits all the buttons, and they believe that it's the pinnacle of the psychedelic experience. Don't believe that it is either. It's just an experience. It's just a reality, and it's a prior reality. And I've experienced that reality many times, and I do believe it's valuable, understanding the unity of all life and the universality of consciousness and the unity of all consciousness. I do believe it gives you more compassion, it it gives you more awareness, it gives you the ability to care about things, so on and so forth. But I don't believe that that experience is necessarily the pinnacle of a psychedelic experience. I believe more in actually utilizing these states to carry out work that enables a true fruitfulness in the human form. So that is powerful. There's no doubt smoking 5-MeO-DMT is extremely powerful. It is a deep spiritual connection. But if you just have that experience and you dissolve into the oneness and then you come back, it might not change anything. It doesn't necessarily change anything. It's more in the work that you do. I believe in the more stripped back, slow down, integrated states that you can really do the work and bring about an authentic connection in your life. And when people take ayahuasca, they take a large dose of mushrooms, it's normal for people to experience other worlds, other beings. I do believe we exist in an infinite ecology of beingness. There is this a field of unity, but there is also this infinite field of multiplicity as well. There is a field of infinite ecology of beingness. There is an absolute intimacy, and there is what would you call it? A distance. Intimacy is closeness, and then you have a distance between beings. Just like we see in the universe, a distance between stars, perhaps. We have a massive universe, an infinite universe, where being is being itself. But generally, say people who are smoking 5-MeO, they are realizing what people who wrote the Vedas understood about the unified nature of creation and the divine play of Leela. And when you do take large doses of mushrooms, you take a decent dose of ayahuasca, for example, especially the tryptamines, do enable you to meet other beings, and they do allow you to go into other worlds, and they do allow you to connect to the plant teachers, and it does allow you to experience and understand many things about the universe and yourself and how things work. And there are some people, and like I said before, perhaps it is the default mode of our atheistic time, in which science is the religion and science only recognizes the existence of the physical as being the primary and only reality, which I believe is a gregarious dogma. It is an ideology which is simply shown to be false if you really explore these materials. It's simply shown to be not the case, and absolutely implausible and untenable that the brain is manufacturing the sophistication of what you can experience, which is far more sophisticated than any art or technology or anything you'll see in any other way. So there's another aspect to taking psychedelics. Oh, 10 minutes, I'm not going to get through this. Yeah, so it's health. And actually, by taking psychedelics, you can actually become more healthy. I believe that by taking mushrooms or ayahuasca, especially the psychoactive plants, they are super tonic herbs, better than anything you'll find on earth, but for the mind, enabling your mind to be healthy, because the psychedelics are like colonics for the mind, flushing the detritus out of your mind, cleaning your brain, and even getting rid of environmental toxins in the body. Even I have felt in myself that, say, taking mushrooms helps me deal with the stress that my body experiences from EMF radiation in our society, in our day and age. I find living in a city, I must take some medicine, some psychoactive plant medicine once a week to be healthy, to stay on top of being in a city. Seriously. That is compulsory. Otherwise I start to become swamp man living in the EMF soup of dodgy pornography that people are watching these days. But ultimately, I believe that psychedelics are useful tools for working on oneself, and that it is most significant to have an ontological, spiritual, theoretical foundation in which you are working on yourself, not in this sense of Anthony Robbins' self-improvement, but having the self-awareness to face yourself and look at your own issues and do what you need to do to fulfill what you need to fulfill in your life. And I believe that it's fundamentally important that each individual comes to have an intentionality whereby they are motivated to do the work on themselves, to do the hard work, and to face all the difficult things, all the difficult emotions and issues and mental confusion and pain and chaos and betrayal and all the crazy things going on in the individual and collective mindset. So again and again, I encourage people to come into this letting go. And in letting go, if you are letting go, then you're actually in a space of forgiveness. Because in letting go, you're not holding on to anything anymore. There's no more grudges. There's no more memories. You're just being present. So many people come to me and they say, my primary issue is that I can't let go. And I think that perhaps it is in letting go which being happens, in which love happens, in which consciousness happens, which intelligence happens. There is, that kind of rap battle consciousness where you're not thinking about it, it's just coming through you. This kind of intelligence of letting the ego go, letting the mind go, letting the culture go, letting everything go, and just being, and then releasing all the shit. That's what ayahuasca will do. It will allow you to see the shit, it'll allow you to see the crap, and it will come out the front and it will come out the back.
Eccomi di nuovo qui con il compito più terribile della serata. quello di sì, ringraziarvi, ma non è questo il terribile, bensì di dirvi alla prossima. E la domanda a questo punto è: Julian, quando torni a trovarci?
Maybe March.
Fantastico! A questo punto ci organizzeremo proprio per avere un lasso di tempo molto ma molto più ampio e dare spazio a tutte le domande. Nel frattempo chi fosse interessato può andare sul sito di Julian, www.julianpalmerism.com, in attesa appunto di rincontrarci di persona. Grazie infinite e buona serata a tutti.